Welcome to Psychology at Work. I'm Dr. Paul Brewerton, otherwise known as the Strengths Guy. As a Doctor of Psychology and the founder and Chair of Strengthscope, I'm here to share my insights with you. Tune in for a regular dose of positive, strengths-based content. My podcasts are packed full of tips and tools designed to enhance your world of work. Ready to dive into the good stuff in this episode? Then let's go. Hi, my name is Dr. Paul Brewerton, founder and chair of Strengthscope, Doctor of Organisational Psychology. I am very excited to have on the show today founder and CEO of Blurred, Nik Govier. Hello, Nik.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And we were talking when we spoke last time about how you spell your name, which is Nik for anyone who's watching this, and Nik, sorry, for anyone who's listening to this and not watching this. And the only other person I know who's done that with their name is my sister. And we were talking about how, well, you tell your story and I'll tell hers.
It's just, I think, that desire to be slightly different. And I think I made the call, when I was an early tween, probably like 9 or something. It was just like, I don't want to be a Nikki or a Nicola. I want to be a Nick, but, I'm just going to take one of the sounds away because I just want to be different from everyone else.
I love it. I mean, I love hearing you say it, right? Because I'm gonna have that conversation with my sister at the weekend. But it literally, I remember that conversation with her, and just thinking, how cool is that? And she probably was about 9.
It's a rebel. It's why do I have to have that spelling?
Yeah, and I would have been
how I've lived my entire life. Pretty much is asking that question.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Anyway, right. Okay. So sorry, I got a little bit distracted there, like right at the start talking about your name.
That's okay.
But let's go on a little bit and talk about you from a business point of view. So I'm going to introduce you so people know who you are. So you're CEO and founder of Blurred, which is a BCorp.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about that later. And launched in October 2018. So that was just pre-COVID. That in itself was really interesting. So maybe we'll get into that when we get there. Blur the lines between communication, sustainability, and management consultancy, combining world-class advisory with world-class creative to deliver real impact for clients, people, and planet. Prior to Blurred, Nik co-founded multi-award-winning agency Unity and remained at its helm for 12 years. Whilst at Unity, Nik was named one of the Sunday Times 35 under 35. Management Today also featured her on its cover and in an exhibition of business leaders, 8 months pregnant.
Yes.
You remember it?
I remember it really well, yeah. Kept thinking, I think I was about 8.5 months pregnant, actually. And I was like, literally, this would not be a good location to give birth in. But luckily I didn't. So I nearly gave birth in IKEA instead, but also managed to avoid that. But, came close.
Love it. Nik also co-founded, invested in agency Tin Man, and has stakes in a number of other businesses, including Albright, the Global Working Women's Network. And you're also an advisory board member of BME PR Pros and a mentor for MSD UK. And for those people who don't know what either of those organizations are about, go check them out. Because I just said them out loud, and all you've got to do is put those initials into Google and you'll find out more. But they're both absolutely worth looking at. Finally, and we will get into this, Nik is proudly neurodiverse. So it's going to be a great conversation. We've already had a couple of chats and I've just loved them. So thank you for being you and showing up as you do. I'm hoping we can talk about your career and what got you to where you are today, including the part you said about what may have galvanized you to rename yourself as Nik so early in life. And how your strengths may have featured in that as well. I know that's kind of more of a recent thing for you in terms of discovery, I guess, or maybe a new framework or a new lens for, looking at the choices that you've made, maybe. But yeah, we'll get into that and talk about your Strengthscope profile that you've completed before today. Like to talk about BCorp. I mentioned that. I'd love to talk about neurodiversity more, your story, and also how you feel organizations can do better in helping people with different neurodivergencies thrive. So, anything more you'd like to say on by way of reflection on your introduction? Did it just sound like you and you're good with it, or was it a bit? Oh, yeah.
No, I'm all good with it. I might, in fact, just have that available to replay every now and then when I'm in a low mood. So thank you.
Sure. Okay. So career-wise, it is a really impressive, yeah, intro for a reason, right? You've done a lot, you're doing a lot, but could you give us a bit of an insight into how you started out in your career, and the turning point experiences that you've had along the way? We kind of touched on a couple of them, but I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, I mean, pretty rubbish reason for going into PR, which is where I started, which was just that I thought it sounded quite glamorous, which is incredibly shallow, but probably the truth of it. I just kind of liked the idea of it, and I knew it was quite social. So how I got my first job was I needed to get to London, so I got a job as a tour guide at Madame Tussauds,
Whoa.
but you always worked weekends and then 3 days during the week. So I ended up then offering my days off to the PR department for free
Oh,
of Madame
brilliant.
Tussauds just to start to get some experience. So I was working 7 days a week, but it did the job. It got my foot on the ladder, so to speak. And then I joined a really big agency and rose actually very, very quickly through the ranks there. I was one of the fastest to kind of ever be promoted. And there was this very amusing moment actually where I was saying how I funded all my holidays at university by being a drugs trial volunteer, which is true.
Mm.
It's like check myself into hospital for a week, have all these drugs tested on me, and then book a holiday. But I remember just someone quipping, oh, is that where you lost the ability to spell? And there being this kind of like tumbleweed, because I'd never told anyone that I was dyslexic. And obviously it was so profoundly obvious, but it was a great kind of moment of kind of comedy and me putting my hand up and
Yeah, yeah.
and it all being fine, because obviously they quickly noticed I had other strengths. And then in my late 20s, I decided to go it alone. And I actually always thought it's just because I'm very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
But I only realized probably last year it's actually because although I did well in other environments, they weren't naturally suited to me as somebody with dyslexia and ADHD. So I think actually what I was doing was just trying to create the perfect environment in which I could thrive.
Yeah.
It's funny how, you get to the age of 48 before you kind of realize why you've done certain things. And I stayed at that company for 12 years. It was
Hmm.
co-founded, 50-50 partnership. And then I had a very painful split out of that. When I just realized, our values were not aligned.
Mm.
We just couldn't, I couldn't in all good conscience continue, but it was incredibly hard because I had to be willing to walk away with nothing.
Mm.
Because as a 50-50 shareholder,
Mm.
who would be damaging the business by leaving the business and therefore open to all sorts of legal exposure, it's very hard to walk away, particularly with a husband who's a stay-at-home dad, so being
Mm.
the income holder and
Mm.
having worked my behind off for 12 years. But it's one of the best things I ever did.
Yeah.
And then I launched Blurred, as you said, in 2018, and the rest really is history.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So tell me about that, the whole like 2018 thing. Because we didn't know what we didn't know about what was
I
going to happen
know.
about a year later. Or I don't know when in 2018 you launched it, but it
Tail end.
wasn't.
Tail end, yeah.
Yeah, right. So it was a year or less than that. No, just over.
Just
Is it?
over.
Just over a
Yeah,
year.
I remember it. I remember
Yeah.
it clearly because we'd had a really good first year, but profits were still, minimal because it was year one.
Yeah.
Suddenly COVID hit and it was terrifying because overnight all our fees were put on hold and we
Yeah.
didn't have enough in the bank to sustain us for a long period of time. But actually, I think it was one of my greatest moments actually in terms of being at Blurred, and relates to some of these strengths you've pulled out here,
Yeah.
is just the kind of ability to suddenly pause and look at the world and say, right, how do we pivot quickly and
Mhm.
which is the direction to go in? And literally by May that year, and I think lockdown started in April, didn't they?
Yeah, I think it was, late March.
Late March, April, exactly. But by
Yeah.
May, we'd pivoted to this position of focusing purely on ESGP, which is ESG and purpose, because we've
Yeah.
noticed that companies with good ESG ratings were outperforming the market
Hmm.
in COVID, and we're
Hmm.
getting more cost-effective access to capital. And with a recession that was likely to come, we were like, that is the way to go.
Yeah.
But actually, it was also totally in line with our values and what we believed in and the work we were doing.
Yeah.
But it was about decisively hooking on that. But it was risky, but it paid off instantly.
Yeah.
And we ended up having a hugely profitable year that year as well. And, so I think it was, I absolutely felt fear, as did my business partners, but that is one of my strengths, I think, is to be able to spot patterns.
Hmm.
And that's why, which I put also largely down to my, neurodivergent mind.
Hmm.
And then be just, the decisiveness of going, right, this is what we're going to do,
Yeah.
off we go.
Yeah. 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 So
Yeah,
I wonder if
so
that's, thank you. That's amazing. And everyone's got their business story about COVID, right? Because every business is at a different stage, different stage of evolution, got different numbers of people involved, and
yeah,
and they're in different industries. And I think, some businesses, some organizations did really well, but they were
yeah,
relatively few, and it's kind of seemed to relate more to, I don't know, supplying what was needed during COVID. Those are the businesses that thrived, right? But
yeah,
actually, the ones that, well, I mean, there were clearly the vast majority did survive, who were established by
yeah,
that stage, by doing something, either because they had
yeah,
cash at bank or because they pivoted or
yeah,
decided that they'd hunker down and, get creative and, do stuff while, there was no other business to be done for a period.
yeah.
But that's fascinating. And so strengths wise, was that creativity and strategic mindedness that enabled you or enables you to see those different patterns, to think creatively about difficult problems and come up with new solutions and then ideate what that might look like from a future state point of view. So you kind of combine, because we were just talking just before this about thinking and how, that cluster for you isn't necessarily the greatest source of energy, but you've just
Yeah.
said then about, but you did do that in that moment, that thinking happened and then quick to action.
Well, I think it is the combination with that, as we said, in the decisiveness. I'm also looking, and again, this is a superhero strength of neurodiversity. It's that I instantly see the entire picture,
Right.
instantly, and I don't
Right.
need any facts to back it up. But then also there are plenty of other people who provide the evidence, and also because what's normally happened is I've picked up a lot of things that a lot of really smart people have said. I'm surrounded by a
Yeah.
lot of people who are way smarter than me, actually, who feed me with bits of information. But what I've got the ability to do is see the patterns
Yeah.
and then quickly move forward. But it's like I don't just see the book. I see the book, the film, the sequels. That I just can. I instantly, when I see a solution, I can see the entire picture. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. There's loads of problems with being neurodivergent. As in, I don't really understand the concept of time. And you should have
Yeah.
seen how many times I had to delete and repost a LinkedIn post yesterday because it was blowing my mind, the complexity of such a task. But some things I can just see. I can just tend to see big pictures,
Yeah.
and then I think because I don't know if it's bravery or whether it's foolhardiness. I actually genuinely don't know. I had this discussion with someone earlier, but
Mm.
I get so excited by when I see a solution.
Mm.
I don't really give myself much room to be fearful that it might be the wrong one.
Love it. I love it. Right. So
I'm excited and I'm
yeah.
motivated. And I guess my persuasiveness kicks in and I'm able to use my enthusiasm to
Yeah.
take people kind of
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
me. So I think that's why I'm a good entrepreneur. And I do also think it's why I'm pretty unemployable now, though, because, if I can't instantly react on something and make it happen overnight, I think I'd feel so incredibly hamstrung. So I work well in an environment where I have the flexibility and freedom to
Yeah.
just follow whims. And I genuinely live quite happily in the future,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
why I have brilliant people around me who are much better at living, in the here and now,
Yeah.
make things happen. Because I get quite bored of that bit of it.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
I can see where we're going, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. So how, right, okay. So that's amazing, right? That's whole strengths piece that you just brought in there and just wove in so effortlessly. I'm just wondering about, as somebody who heads their own business and has that, desire to initiate on the basis of a synthesis of whatever's out there, right? All of this information, and then clock it, decide, get enthusiastic about it, communicate, bring people with you. How I suppose my question is, how do you keep those energies in check sufficiently so as not to overwhelm the team, the people who are then who
Ah,
that's where my question was going. Because
that,
because I
yeah,
think that's a real challenge for many entrepreneurs. Like the ideation, the thinking of the imagining of that future state, but then and then being so, you know, not gung-ho exactly, but just wanting to get on with it, you know, that can create real energy. But it can, you know, it can feel like a lot. So yeah, how do you manage that? Because that's a great challenge.
And it's really insightful of you, but it makes sense considering what you do. It's constant balance actually, because our coach, you know, says, can you just kind of tone down the big Monday energy on a Friday afternoon? You know, that's the problem, is it's kind of constant. And people, particularly on a Monday morning, can be a bit like, what? You know, because I've kind of brewed on loads of things over the weekend and then I'm back in. But again, it's our coach, and we embedded it in the business from day one. So everybody is coached fortnightly within the company as long as they want to be. But we actually realized about 7 months into the business that actually she needed to have a bigger role. And she was already on our board, but she then started chairing the board because actually I wasn't so good at taking the people with me, as in they were with me in terms of the belief.
Yeah.
But I can sometimes move at such pace
Yeah.
that I can lose the ability to take the time for the people who are more ponderous, which is also vital. And like I said, I'm surrounded by people who counter me positively.
Yeah.
So she started chairing the board so she could go, okay, Nick, thank you. Now I
Right.
want to ask it. Do you know what I mean? So I constantly put in people and measures to ensure that everything gets everything gets balanced out, really.
Brilliant.
And like I said, it's not my responsibility to manage the day today, and I absolutely trust our brilliant managing director to do that.
Yeah.
And instead, you know, our relationship is much more of me saying to her, what do you need from me? How can I make your life easier? Because I honestly think she's got the hardest job in the business. You know, and then she decides the speed we need to go at, etc., which works really well.
Brilliant. So I suppose, complementary strengths partnering or something, or, you know, just complementary strengths use, right? Bringing in the strengths that you don't have in order to make sure that you can keep yours in balance.
And I did it from day one, as well as our coach being in part the foundational team. There was also 3 other kind of founding partners. One's our chief client officer, one's chief strategy officer, and one's a chief financial officer. So again, very complementary skills. We all do our own thing. They are better at the things they do. You know, I'm the best at the thing that I do, and that's why it works. But a very quick learning was also for us was, you know, keeping your nose out of other people's dreams, because there's a lot of enthusiasm. I'd run a business before, but the others hadn't, of like wanting to be involved in everything. And it was like, no, there's a reason you are brilliant at this thing. You know, you go do that, and you can listen to you know, everyone else. One of our values is democratic. Your voice will be heard. You know, you must always hear other voices, but it's your decision you know, what you want to do in your own field, essentially. So often I set the vision and the direction, and then everyone else just picks it up in their own respective ways and works out how that's translated and communicated.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. I want to kind of go back to ESGP, right? Because you mentioned purpose as an addition to the ESG, but many people listening or watching won't know what the ESG stand for. Which are, please?
Environmental, social and governance. So environmental is basically, this is about corporate citizenship, essentially. So businesses and their risk to the world. So either environmental factors, so biodiversity, climate crisis. Social means human, human-related stuff, so diversity-related, or things like human rights. Governance is how well a business actually, you know, behaves, does it pay tax, etc. And then purpose is the good a company kind of proactively does in the world. So that's essentially what it is. But ESG is more about risk and limiting risk, where purpose is more about overt good, essentially boiled down in its
That's
simplicity.
Brilliant, really helpful, right? And that for you, with the P on the end in particular, then became that kind of passion sweet spot, right? What you want to do within your field, that's going to differentiate you know, particularly in an extremely competitive market, you know, and particularly given what you've noticed at the time during COVID. I guess that I've got two questions around it. The first is, why do you feel so passionate about that? I mean, in addition to seeing the opportunity, is there I mean, I guess there's an assumption here that I'm making. You're BCorp, right?
Yeah.
So that's not easy, you know, to get that status. And it's really closely related to those four things. You know, I mean, like that essentially is
what it is. Exactly.
mainly
People, planet, and profit. It is exactly those.
it is, isn't it? Right.
Yeah.
So that suggests that there's a real underlying connection for you personally.
100%. And to my fellow founders. So all of our backgrounds were in communications. So we all came from comms consultancies, either being very senior in them or owning them. And what that meant as a comms business is essentially you would take the brilliant work a company would do and promote it to various different audience groups. And I was already working kind of in this space because Unity's kind of flagship client, the work we were most famous for, was working with M&S on Plan A, which was its, you know, major environmental platform.
Mm-hmm.
But when I left Unity, I no longer wanted to just promote the good work that companies were doing. I wanted to help make companies better, give them a better story to tell, and then tell that story, which is where this blurring of the lines between comms, which is our heartland, but also being super credible in the management consulting and sustainability consulting space came in as well, which meant hiring a bunch of people and bringing in a load of new skills that none of the founders actually knew how to do, which you know, has been major challenging at times, but we were all driven by this desire to actually make a difference. And we work with like huge global clients, and I mean some of, you know, many of the biggest clients in the world, and when you're pushing them even 0.25% further than they perhaps naturally want to go, that makes a material difference to the world. And that's what helps me sleep at night, because it's like, you know, we're in a terrible state, you know, from a climate crisis perspective. At least I know that this essentially tiny company, you know, is actually making a difference. But, you know, but we're evolving again now, because even the language ESG, for example, we're pulling back slightly from that language and talking much more about impact because of the culture wars, particularly in the States, which aren't going to be resolved anytime soon, certainly not until there's been a general election, where, you know, social issues are very political because, you know, because of wokeism. You know, where environmental issues clearly then, you know, there are clear Republican and Democratic distinctive kind of quagmires. So and a lot of our clients are American. So so we're just, the notion of what we do remains the same. It's just we're using more of the language of helping clients deliver impact and then tell that story to whoever those important stakeholders are, from, you know, the capital markets to policymakers to employees or consumers and beyond, you know, to whoever needs to hear that story.
Thank you. Going back to the strengths bit, anything more you'd like to share around, and we talked about in terms of bringing balance to the strengths when they have the potential to go a little bit too Monday big, you know, bringing those into balance. But are there any others that kind of have the potential for overdrive for you, or drainers, actually, you know, those, if you get into that space too much, you just find it, or maybe you manage that by having these complementary strength partners?
No, it's always a balance, to be honest. And I think I may have mentioned this phrase to you, but it was the most accurate description of my ADHD is Ferrari speed brain, but push bike brakes. It's an absolute shocker, because I love it when I enter this. It feels like some form of higher consciousness where there's at least 25 things happening simultaneously.
Wow.
I mean, I love it because I feel like I'm on this like magical plane. I'm in flow, but it can't be sustained, and something gives, and the worst of it is I can't pull the brake because it's push bike brake and I'm going too fast. So it's really about trying to just stay just below that point. But that's again why, you know, I have regular coaching, and I have and also my team are aware of it. So for example, if I stop being able to finish a sentence, if I'm halfway through a sentence and I start another sentence, it's a tell And then
Mm.
they call our coach, and I get a phone call.
That's
Who's
amazing. Have you,
how I
but you've
respond.
called it out. Like, did they notice that? Or did you know that that's what's,
They work it out. So sometimes I'll
yeah.
be so frustrated because my coach will call and I'll be like, I'm in the middle of 17 things. And she's like, I know you are. And I shall tell you for why I know you are, and then I'll be really irritated because I'll be like, but I'm in a really good place. And she's like, I know you think you are, but we also know what tends to happen.
That's
You'll take
amazing.
off and suddenly. And another one that I struggle with is the compassion one,
Mm.
actually, where I'm hugely, I know it's listed on the Strengthscope as compassion and empathy separately, but I feel very, very deeply.
Mm.
And I think part of that was, I guess, being undiagnosed neurodivergent and being categorized as stupid and lazy
Mm.
when I was young, and I'm clearly neither of those things. So I'm very empathetic to other people,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of their background, life
Mm-hmm.
stage, all sorts of intersectional issues that might make life challenging for people.
Mm.
But I also think I am a bit of an empath. We talked about this before, but I can't
Mm.
even go to places like the Tower of London or anywhere like
Mm.
that where there's been like pain, like say torture
Yeah.
or pain or imprisonment, because I literally feel it so acutely. I can't bear it. So I find that difficult because I feel I'm not one of those CEOs that can just look objectively. Like, I see human beings, and I sometimes find the difficult choices we all have to make for the good of the company
Mm.
very, very challenging, because
Mm.
I feel deeply everyone's personal
Mm-hmm.
situations and status, so it's
Yeah.
something I have to constantly work at. And again, I have people around me who it's never about trying to make me not who I am. And because we are a very values driven business, we all feel like that, but just to make sure we focus in on the greater good sometimes.
Yeah. As in, like, what's best for the business overall,
Yeah,
even if that's going to impact a human
individual.
or human. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that makes
exactly.
sense. Yeah. And having that, it's really interesting. You've referred to your coach, um, right the way through this,
Yeah,
almost to the point where it sounds like that's normal business practice, that every business would have a coach who is coaching different members of the team, etc. And that maybe is true in some organizations, but it's quite rare, right? So tell me about that a little bit more, because that I think is really interesting, well, for any business
oh yeah,
leader. You've got that feels like you such an essential part of everything you
it is.
described in terms of the work in the business, right?
It's honestly so key. So how it came about is she's actually one of my best pals who retrained as a coach, and I was really struggling with my last company, and she was like, you really need a coach, you really need a coach. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, you be my coach. She's like, I can't be your coach, I'm your best pal, I cannot be your coach. And I was like, oh, can we just talk about this then? So of course she ended up coaching me anyway, although in a non-official capacity. And she got me to do the most extraordinary thing, which was to walk away from my own company, which on paper was madness, utter
Mm.
madness, like
Mm.
the financial risk and the pressure and, you know, everything I'd worked so hard for. But then I thought, if you've managed to persuade me to
Mm.
you've taken me from this place of absolutely categorically no, to
Mm.
not only doing it, but then building this, working towards building this amazing new vision for what a new company could be like. I was like,
Mm.
imagine if everybody in that business had that same level of attention and focus on being their true best self. And that word true is vitally important, because
Mm.
we have such a diverse team. And I don't just mean in terms of neurodiversity, I mean in terms of ethnicity, gender,
Mhm.
age, sexuality, religious, social background, and all very, very intentionally.
Mm.
Um, and so she coaches everyone to be their true best versions of themselves. And I
Mm.
always say it's such an intangible benefit, but I'd love to like roll back, take her and that function out of the business and roll forward again and see
Mm.
where we'd be. But
Mm.
I know for a fact we would be in a very different place. And although all coaching is confidential, so there could well be situations where she's helping to coach someone out of the business because it's the best thing for them as an
Yeah.
individual. What she's able to do is so I never know what goes on in coaching, but what she will bring to the board is say, themes, you know, that we might want to consider is maybe people are feeling a bit too much of a pinch in this area or that area. She can bring themes that she's seeing. So we get to address a lot of things before they become problems, kind of organizationally. But for me, it's like, it's been such the difference. And I know quite a lot of organizations have coaching for senior people, for example. But for us, it's right across the board.
And how many people right now?
About 25.
That's
It's not cheap, you know, but it's absolutely set in stone. And look, I had a wobble recently, a major health worry, but there were elements of kind of burnout in that. And it's partly linked to the fact that, you know, she was ill, quite seriously ill for a while, so didn't coach for a couple of months. And lo and behold, you know, a lot of the things that keep me in check weren't there. And then I wasn't able to spot my own, you know, spiraling. It's that vital. And but also what she's able to do is coach couples or teams, you know. So sometimes like she said to me, like, you and X person, you know, I can see you're rubbing up against each other. We're gonna have a little session, the three of us, and I'll be like, oh, really? And of course, lo and behold, it's instantly sorted out.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. That is, I honestly have never heard that before. I don't know if you know anyone else who's got that.
No. Not to the extent that not as an absolute baked in core. No.
Yeah. I mean, that is inspirational to hear. And I'm sure people listening to this and watching it will just be thinking, how can I make that happen? Because that just sounds so important. You're right. You can't A/B test it to see what would have happened if, but it's made such a difference. Okay, I'm going to move this on, if that's okay, to talk about, and you have been all the way through, but I really want to talk about, I guess, your personal story with neurodiversity, and how that has played the role that it has in your work, in your career, in your choices, and some of the benefits it's brought you. And you've touched on several, but also some of the challenges it's brought you as well. That'd be great just to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, I think probably 11 or 12. And actually, I wonder, maybe, in fact, did I miss the C because I just literally didn't know the difference? Who knows? But I don't think so. And that was a really light bulb moment for me, because actually this report came back and said, no, this kid is intelligent, smart, persuasive. Actually, they spotted a lot of the things you're talking about here.
Yeah.
And I remember them saying, so, you know, she could be, you know, they give you like ideas of potential roles you could do or jobs. And it was a TV presenter. I was like, oh, this is really exciting. But I only discovered my ADHD last year, actually, and only because my children are very neurodivergent, spanning autism, ADHD, dyslexia, cognitive processing disorders, etc. And it was only through that you know, you kind of realize the source of a lot of this stuff. But I know I've mentioned superpower before, but I do want to just have a disclaimer that the reason it's a superpower for me is that I was brought up in an incredibly loving environment with parents who believed in me and means to make it a strength rather than a weakness. I'm very conscious of the intersectional issues here, because if people are not supported, if people, I know people who've worked for me where it's clear they're neurodivergent, but their families, for cultural reasons, you know, cannot be considered. They just to kind of struggle on without understanding. But there's a lot of people who have got autism or ADHD who end up in jails, you know, huge proportions of it, because they're written off. And I was never written off, so hence it's become a superpower. But you know, I see around corners, you know, I see things, and I'm like, I don't understand why no one else sees this. The answer is so so crystal clear. And I do think also, maybe not because of that's how my brain is, but I do think, like I said, it makes me more of an empathetic human being, because I understand that there are struggles with things like this. And you know, some of the weaknesses are, well, I drive a lot of people insane. I drive my husband insane, because you know, when someone is on 7 planes at the same time, to get them to focus on one is very challenging. And I'm not one of those people with ADHD that can't finish anything. I'm the opposite. I finish everything. It's just I can't focus in. I do it all at the same time. And even in conversations, I can flip between several things with any minute. I mean, obviously I can't spell. I find really simple tasks like social media unbelievably challenging. Like I'll press the wrong button and it drives me nuts. Or even just if I'm trying to find someone on LinkedIn, just the amount of times I have to retype in their name to try and get it right. You know, it's just it's exhausting. And time, you know, I have to have a PA because I cannot put in the diary on the right day at the right time. And I find time just really confusing. So someone asked me the other day to do a 5-minute introduction, and I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how complicated I find that notion, because I'm like, I don't know how long 5 minutes is. Whereas ask me to speak for an hour, like no problem. So it's a weird it's a weird thing. Definitely more strengths, but there's definitely, you know, frustrations for me and those who surround me.
Yeah, thank you. And it's coming up more and more, right, in the clients that we work in. You know, so more and more organizations are aware now of neurodiversity, and rightly so, right? And this has all happened, I don't know, feels like it's been the last couple of years that it's really become quite big, you know, but clearly that's from a fairly low bar, you know, like there wasn't a lot being discussed and now there's some. So that's a step. What more do you feel, I don't know, organizations can and should do in order to help leverage neurodiversity, right? For, you know, so actually utilize the superpowers, create a space that's safe enough for people to feel as though those superpowers can be that, particularly given what you said about those intersectional challenges, you know, where people may well not want to acknowledge, be able to, you know, be in a place where they've received a diagnosis, or, you know, what do organizations do about all of that? Because there is this kind of twin thing going on around, you know, you've got to get it right. You're right. You don't want, people don't want to get things wrong or say the wrong thing. And then it all becomes, I don't know, a bit tricky. But is it actually? Because we're just people and we are going to get it wrong all the time. So, you know, there is something here to be talked about. But yeah, just what your thoughts from an organizational, I don't know, people professional point of view, right? So the HR folk and L&D folk and all
There's
people
so
in
many
organizations.
like courses out there, and
Yeah.
I signed up to something about 6 months ago that was just an introduction to neurodivergence in the workplace. It was, I think, 2 or 3 hours, cost a couple of £100. It was massively informative, because obviously I actually do have quite a good understanding of this, because like I said, my family spans the spectrum. But it's really easy to actually go out and find a course that can help inform you, and that's the most fundamental and
Yeah.
basic thing is understanding like what people are likely to struggle with, and therefore, but also equally what are the things that people could excel at. And then also just being an open organization around it. So we're very clear when in an interview process, we will say right from the outset, is there anything we need to know about you so that we can edit this process to ensure you know you have the best opportunity to thrive. And our in-house recruitment team also say, by the way, our CEO is neurodivergent, as of 25% of the workforce. So it's very clear that we're a welcoming environment. But it's not just for them. Like, we have a glass-walled meeting room. There's no way I could interview someone in that. I'd be like, oh, look, a dog's just gone past. How lovely. You know, it's about right from the beginning being open to it. We also have this thing called a disability passport with a capital D and A. And there's a note that often a disability can be a real ability as well.
Yeah.
Really, really, really clearly states to people how to get the best out of that human being. And it's difficult sometimes because we are democratic, it's one of our values, but equally not all rules can apply to everybody, because sometimes people are overwhelmed in the office. So you know, our 2-day in the office rule for some people does have to be slacken sometimes, but that's challenging to others who are a bit like, well, why, why do we have to be in? And there you go. We don't have all the answers, by the way, but I'm just talking through some of our own struggles. We also have this thing when people join us, we ask for their 5 personal needs, and all the quarterly reviews, the company is reviewed against those 5 personal needs, as well as the company reviewing the individual. And that's not just for people who are neurodivergent. We all have stuff going on in our lives. Some people may have elderly parents or caring responsibilities, or they might be struggling through menopause, or they might have a deep external passion that they feel is very important. They get the balance. So all of these things help demonstrate to individuals that we're keen to understand the strengths and the weaknesses. We're keen to create an environment that works. But we've even gone so far as, our coach did a 2-day intensive coaching the neurodivergent extra training course. Because we're tricksy. We don't respond the way, neurotypical people do. So I think there's lots that companies can do, but the most important thing is just know it's a strength. Either Oxford or Cambridge, I can't remember one, has written a report with the hypothesis that neurodivergence is actually evolution in process. That these are the new super beings that are required in the world we live in now of impending climate crisis, where the neurotypical thinkers have failed us and got the world into the state it's in. And then you now need super creative, different types of minds to kind of get us to the other side. Now, wouldn't you like that in your organization? Why would you not like someone who could see around corners? But you have to create the environment where it's okay that they fuck up because they can't spell. Do you know what I mean? Or they're going to struggle on things. It's about embracing. And again, it goes back to the true best self of every individual. Not just the best, but the true. That's so vital.
I mean, I'm literally writing notes, right, for me. Yes, for this conversation a bit, but I don't need to, because you're so articulate in talking about it. But for myself to just go away and have conversations internally in my company about some of the things you're talking about, because partly because they're practical and possible. The things that you're talking about, they're not, go educate yourself. That's a brilliant first start for anybody, right? Just go and find some things that, where you can understand better and more. But, those extras, like that 5 personal needs,
easy,
and then getting and then having the organization held up to scrutiny to see if it's doing it, like, as you say, really easy, really powerful, and people will feel appreciated as a human being because you're asking about theirs, not generally. You're asking about
then exactly as a human being. And here's a top tip: don't let them give you 3. It has to be 5, because the first 3 are normally all the same, and they're the easy ones. They're work-life balance. They're all kind of obvious. It's when you really push someone for the 4th and the 5th, that's when you tend to actually get stuff that's useful. And it's not just for the neurodivergent. It's like one of my business partners, he's barely coherent before 10:30 in the morning. But his brain is on fire at midnight. It's like, the team need to know that, so that they can get that of him. And there was this big thing a couple of years ago where everyone was signing up to, like, our company doesn't email after 6 o'clock at night. Like, we're the opposite. It's like, who are we to tell, Stu, for example, that he has to do all of his work, within working hours? Instead, we just have like a disclaimer on our email saying, my working hours might not be the same as yours. Do not need to respond outside yours. But we're all about never trying to pigeonhole people. It's about trying to understand the whole human. I only go into the office every other week for 2 days a week because, I live a really long way away. I live on Dartmoor National Park, but 2, I have a highly neurodivergent family, and I cannot be away more than that. That is a personal need of mine that comes above every single other thing in my life, including my own company, because the stability of my family is obviously first and foremost. And the company needing to know that about me is really, really important.
Thinking about, sorry, I was just going to ask about that, because how far are people disclosing that? Is it like widely shared within the whole organization? You know, the
We always
5-person
ask.
leads.
We ask.
Right.
So they get shared with the. We always say this will be shared with the board and your line manager. We would ideally like to share with the rest of the company, but tell us if you
Yeah.
feel comfortable with that. But then there's that's the 5 personal needs, but there is a separate question where we share the employee handbook and where they can see everybody's, don't talk to me before 10 o'clock in the
Yeah.
morning, or, come to me when you can't do complicated maths because I've got one of those weird brains, or whatever
Yeah.
it is. So people get to add that as well.
I love that. I did a piece of work recently with the team, and we went through a sort of questionnaire where people could talk about their preferred mode of communication, attitude towards meetings. Is it okay to be late? Is it not okay to be late? And people just kind of filled this thing in, so it's a big spreadsheet everyone can access. But I'm just going to share it because I just really enjoy it, because I'd love to live in this world. So one of the questions was, are you a people pleaser? On the basis that if you are, probably you're going to say yes to stuff, but then you may regret it later. So that's quite important information. But someone wrote in response to that, "What's a people pleaser?" And he meant it.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I think that's amazing. It's just wonderful. I mean, honestly, if I could just live there for a month.
I know. Yeah, this stuff's funny. Actually, I'm going to add that one about meetings because for me, because actually I think it's because of this thing with time with me. If someone's even a minute late to a meeting, I start to lose my shit. And I'm a really nice, compassionate person. But I think it's because I find it so hard to be on time, and my life is ruled by alarms.
Yeah.
I'm a bit like, if I've managed to get here, and I don't even understand what time is, you can really not be. I mean, obviously 1 minute I'm over-egging it, but one of my team is consistently 5 to 10 minutes late, and it makes me apoplectic.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, it's disrespectful. It's like what I can achieve in 5 minutes is, it's significant.
I
And
know.
I don't have luxury in my life because I've got a demanding family and I've got a big job. It's like, don't take 5 minutes from me when you don't.
Exactly. But I think people in this, that unless you say, they don't necessarily know.
I know because it's different, because it's different for them. So you only ever have your own experience.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm going to I was going to ask a question, and this is a bit niche, but then the people who listen to and watch this podcast are a little bit niche, and many of them are interested in assessment at work, psychometrics, Strengthscope, etc. So one of the things that's coming up increasingly from our clients at Strengthscope is around psychometric assessments, and when people do present with neurodivergencies, they've had a diagnosis. What can you do, or should you do, by way of, I don't know, just should you, or do you, or do you have to change anything by way of, in terms of and I guess it's different for different psychometrics, right? I mean, there are tests out there that are used particularly in recruitment, which are speed tests, power tests. There are, they're for particular cognitive abilities, whatever. I suppose I'm talking primarily about Strengthscope, but it could be any of them. I mean, I don't feel that there can be a standard kind of do this and all will be well, because everybody's neurodivergence is different. But I mean, is that what guidance or advice or thoughts have you got?
Well, like you say, it's really hard because there's many different types of neurodivergence. And even if, for example, you have autism, the first thing we were told when one of our children was diagnosed with autism is, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. I.e., even how people present across that spectrum is so broad. But I guess it's just like clear understanding of what's expected, exactly how something will run, being mindful of things. Like I said, it's like, don't put someone with ADHD in a room that's got a glass wall and expect them to focus intently on something for 20 minutes, So I think the more people are really conscious of what those things are. But I mentioned this to you last time, one of my children was diagnosed with interesting dyslexia first, but that was when she was 7, and I think now there's no signs of that. So I think it was the other neurodiversity clouding the assessments, but she was very clearly autistic, but she also scored incredibly highly on the ADHD scale, not like my son, but still very high. But what they said is it may well be the autism impacting the well, actually not even just the autism, but this other cognitive learning thing she's got. or anything new is super challenging. So therefore, putting another test in front of her soon after she'd done the previous test without the ability for her mind to kind of reset itself may have completely skewed the figures. So in the end, they left that one as a question mark, because they were like, we actually don't know what this test is showing us, because the environment wasn't right for her, you know, to take
that's really good. I mean, that's really helpful as an illustration, right?
Yeah.
Of how unique this is as an experience.
Yeah.
And how people don't always necessarily know that, you know, like that level, that nuance of it could be that and then this that led to this result or whatever. So it's really important, I guess, just to be conscious of that. I mean, it's in a way, it's more straightforward with something like Strengthscope, because at the end of it all, you completed a set of questions at a certain time in a certain context.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to decide whether it's a good reflection of you or not. And we always say that in a feedback session, right? So, you know, it's not the thing telling you you're that. These are your responses, but we recognize that, you know, on a different day of May, it looks slightly different. And you and I talked about this when we talked before, you know, can context change it? Yeah, it can, to an extent. So, you know, actually that's really where the start point should be. You know, do you feel this is a good reflection of you? Because if not, let's talk about it.
You're totally right, because I bet you anything, if you were able to see how long it took me to complete mine, it would be much faster than the average person, because that is, again, that's my ADHD at play. You know, whereas someone else with ADHD might start it, stop it, go make a cup of tea, start doing something else, whereas I would have been doing it whilst thinking of 3 other things, but still done it really quick, because that, you know, that's who I am. There's a story I want to tell, actually, that it's a bit off piece, but I think it's really interesting, because it also plays into this thing that people lean into the stuff they want to hear. And another friend of mine, another coach, actually told me this thing about this a test they do with companies, where they put them in a room and they give them a situation, and it's about a race team, and it's like they give them all this really detailed facts and information and say, you know, this is a race team. You have to make a decision as a group as to whether this car races today. Do you know about this thing?
I don't know about that specifically, but I know, you know,
the kind of thing.
Assessment and development centers typically would have that kind of group exercise.
And basically, you know, they say, you know, most people normally, we're going to give you an hour, but most people get it done in like half an hour, and all this kind of stuff. And around the wall in this room is pictures of, like, you know, champagne, the corks popping and all of this stuff. And most companies decide to race. Most people decide to race, and then it's revealed afterwards that it's actually the Challenger. It's all the data just translated from the Challenger, whatever it's called. You know,
the space shuttle.
And what it's trying to show them is, like, all the data is telling you here not to do something, but all the visual cues and things like, but most people get this done in half an hour. No impact. It's those subliminal things that sit with people, that they feel they're being pushed to make the decision that actually you should launch, or you should and that is what happened with Challenger, was everything said no. But it's interesting in the context of this, because again, even if you're asking someone to do an assessment and you're like, you know, take half an hour, although, you know, most people will do it in 20, these things like settle on us.
It's a good point.
Right? Anyway, I've always found that so fascinating, how, you know, non-visual and visual cues can make you make the wrong, you know, decisions in life.
That super helpful. And I think that, you know, in terms of advising people around completing something like Strengthscope or any assessment, right, it's, you know, you've just got to be conscious of that. You know, you don't want to be leading people down a set of particular, you know, just a way of thinking about it. And, you know, we always say with Strengthscope, just complete it as you. You know, you at your best. We provide those cues in the questionnaire as well. You know, thinking yourself in that way, and it will be as accurate as it can be, but it's open, you know, and it can change. Okay, I am going to bring us to a close. Thank you so much for, you know, I've loved it too. But before I do that, I would like to ask a couple of questions. So the first is a bit of life advice, really. If you've got anything that you would like to share, based on your experiences of the world of work, or any advice that you would give to a younger version of you, if you could do that incredible time melding thing
Mhm.
that would involve.
It's actually really, it's so clear, and I do a whole hour-long like talk on this subject, which I call When Wrong is Right. But it's like lean into your failures. It's like, so I say to myself, it's like they're gonna come, they're gonna be horrific, they're gonna be painful. You're gonna shout and scream, you're gonna wish you could rewind the clock, but it is, every failure is the foundation upon which the next version of yourself, is born from. And I believe it's so profoundly, and even when I was, gearing up to walk away from my own company, that's what I did. I went away and I researched all the world's biggest failures and what they then became. People like Walt Disney, bankrupt by the time he was 22. People like Steve Jobs, who was kicked out of his own company, and then went to create, Pixar, and then created Next, which was then bought by Apple, and he ended up back there again. And obviously I'm neither of those people, but I literally went and researched examples of people where it looked like that they'd hit the end of their road, and actually saw that it was the beginning of a new version of themselves. So that's what I'd say to myself. I'd be
That's
like,
awesome.
Feel the pain, but then know that it's going to take you somewhere better.
Totally. And that we talk about growth mindset when we're in positive psychology mode, right? Rather than fixed. Fixed is about getting there and staying there, and then protecting yourself and putting the ladder up and going, I just want to repeat the same thing over and over again. Whereas growth mindset is saying, be prepared to fail, know it's learning, know that that's going to lead to evolution, it's going to lead to something new, and that, as you say, lean into it, never be afraid of that. That can be tricky, in organizations which don't feel safe to do that in, for example, but if you stay true to that value, you will continue to evolve.
And it's a blurred value, daring, dare to fail, and everyone is allowed to fail. You are allowed to fail. You're not allowed to fail because you've, not bothered doing, the work. You're allowed to fail if you tried something and it didn't work. We just try and fail fast. That's all.
Yeah, brilliant. Perfect. Anything that you've said, when it comes to neurodiversity, there's plenty of, good things out there, that don't necessarily need a specific recommendation, but is there anything else that you would recommend people go away and look at, consume, apart from The World?
Well, what I do, which is really bad, is I buy books and then they live on my bedside table, and I hope that over the course of the night, by osmosis,
we say the same thing.
I know.
My trick though has been audiobooks. That goes in then.
I know. I should do, and I just discovered yesterday actually that you can get them as part of your Spotify subscription, which I hadn't realised.
Only that's only happened the last few months.
Okay, so it's a new thing, but also because podcasts I play at night to calm my brain. But the problem is they send me to anything audio in my ears, that send me to instantly to sleep, because I've kind of used that as a
that is a problem. So and particularly because I was thinking the only time I do it is when I'm driving, so that'd be even worse.
Yeah. You don't want that. Well, I'm much better at bite size. I'm much better at bite size.
Okay,
so how I've ever learned anything really is by just Googling it and then just reading like small articles. So it's not that I would push anyone to any one particular site. It's more that just kind of, if you want to find information on the stuff, there is so much of it out there. So just Google it and do it. And like I said, if you're an HR director or you're a company owner that really wants to embrace some of the things we've said, you literally just have to type in understanding a neurodiverse workforce, and you'll get about 100 different
That's
options.
brilliant. It's such a good piece of advice. It's like, know what you want to look for. That's the main thing.
Exactly. And then you can find it. That's the beauty of the world we live in now, which I also find overwhelming because there's just so much information. But you'll be able to find it. Anyone can find this stuff, and just bother to educate yourself, because that knowledge is that power, and then realizing that some of the people around you you might think are real pains in the arse actually could be a super strength to your organization if you found a way to let them flourish in their own way.
Brilliant. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, why would they not? Have you got a preferred kind of method for that? LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is and everyone now knows that it's Nik with an Nik.
Yeah.
It's Nik Govier. Just drop me a line on LinkedIn. I'm pretty good in the main on getting back to people.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nik. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've learned loads. I
Yeah.
feel inspired. I'm literally going to have about 4 conversations. Like they're in my head already happening, but I'm now going to go and have them. Certainly over the course of the next week. So, and I'm sure that the same will happen for many people listening and watching. So I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And I've loved this conversation too. It's yeah, I think we could have gone on forever. So
I know
always
we
a good
could.
sign. But thank you and have a lovely weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much, Nick.